Moffat's going to be there. Gagan's going to be there. So is Beachy, Chocolates Robertson and Brock. Big, bad Sandown. Big, bad Sandown today. The tough circuit.
I know very well that when I look back on the 60s, early 60s, and the promoter of Warwick Farm would say to me, I would get big money, appearance money, for Warwick Farm and for other tracks. Was sponsored by Mobil Oil in those early days, and the crowds were unbelievable. I mean, not that I'm just saying it, but I've read stories, recent stories and past stories about the crowds that went to Oran Park to see Moffat and Jane and Beachy in the 71-72 final rounds. The track was totally full. The grandstand at Warwick Farm was full. The creek was full. I mean, you couldn't get any more people. People were hanging from the trees because the expectations were the clashes, the mud guards bashing, the tire. I mean, Norm was a showman. Norm would always have his tyres on fire, you know, and they loved that. And the fact that expectations of someone get hit up the arse by a Camaro or Mazda or any bloody thing, the crowd loved it. And really, it was in the interest of the promoter to promote that rivalry which existed or didn't exist.
This is one of the hero motor cars of Australian motor racing. This is the car that Moffat has had for nearly 4 years, attempting to win the Australian Touring Car Championship with. Never quite did it. One year or another, it was Norm Beachy or Bob Jane that somehow got in the way. And Moffat, despite on occasion absolutely convincing displays of superiority, never quite managed to put together enough points to win the title.
In spite of its success, history will show that Moffat's Mustang never won the Australian Touring Car Championship, despite 4 hard years of trying. In 1971, a sensational incident at Sandown, where Moffat ignored a black flag when he was leading, cost him the race. In the final race of the series, the title could potentially be won by Gagan, Jane or Moffat. Despite a gearbox problem, Moffat overcame an 18-second deficit to catch Gagan, who was running second, and then managed to get onto the tail of Jane's 7-litre Camaro. But Jane hung on to the lead and, as a result, won the championship.
That race was typical of, I mean, as Moffat had a problem during the race, was running third, Gagan was second, I was leading the race reasonably comfortably, in the sense that if you're using your brains in a race and you can lead, you don't run away and extend your engine or risk a lockup or anything. So you drive very carefully, just maintain your lead as much as you need, which then gives the impression to the following drivers like Moffat in the latter laps of that race that they can possibly pass you. Well, of course, they've got to do 2 things. They've got to get past the back of your car, number 1, and number 2, I won't let them. So, and then if Moffat finishes very close to me, it's exciting, and that's what people pay for. So I'm not a promoter in the car as well as a racetrack promoter, and I owning Calder Park at the time, you see. So, and that's why I got paid money, starting money. Good starting money.
The Mustang era effectively came to an end in 1972, the last year of the improved production category. Gagan had sold his Mustang and was racing a Falcon GTHO. And Moffat's Trans Am was the only serious challenger remaining for Bob Jane's Camaro. Although the Mustang won 3 rounds, 2 DNFs and a disqualification for forcing Jane off the track at Warwick Farm put him out of contention. Bob Jane won the championship for the 2nd time.
Al was a good guy, and he was very intense about his racing, and he took it more seriously than anyone I know, and which is a good thing, all right, for everybody. He hit him up the arse at Warwick Farm, one of the series in '72, and he had prior in that day, the same day, hit Digby Cook up the bum in a production car race, which put Digby Cook into the sleepers at the beginning of the pit straight, which caused a nasty feeling at Warwick Farm that particular day, and some really bad feelings from the crowd and from the competitors. And then I was leading the race in the championship series of the same day. He hit me up the arse in that race.
A long, long way back, and where's Jane and Moffat? Because that's Manticus now, and there's Moffat by himself and no Jane. Manticus up into second place, and a very crunched up Alan Moffat. Well, we can draw our own conclusions about this. The gap is now out to, and Moffat's going to blow a front tyre very shortly. You can see the smoke coming off it. Moffat has to retire soon. I'd say probably Jane backed off a shade too early. Moffat hit him. Jane will be parked on a fence somewhere down in the S's most likely. Moffat's wheel even looks as though it's leaning in at the top as well. But this hands the race to Gagan on a plate. Moffat surely isn't going to continue racing like this, although it looks as though he is. And Manticus hurries on in second place, and Moffat, with the crunched nose, presses on. And
I ran off the track, and I nearly killed two flaggies. I could see my car sliding on the grass, these two flaggies running, and I thought, I've got him. I'm going to kill him. And it really scared me. And when I say scared me, wasn't so much scared, but I was really concerned very deeply that I had an incident here that was going to involve other people.
Just coming to the top of our picture now is Bob Jane, nose up and down, braking viciously, coming into the pits, and I don't think anybody better stand in front of him as he comes down the deceleration lane. I don't think Mr. Jane will be terribly happy.
There was an incident where I chatted him up, and which I don't like to talk about because it's a bit embarrassing, but I hit him, frankly, and there was nobody in Warwick Farm that could be a witness, because he'd caused an attitude to himself on that day that was just really terrible, and so they couldn't find a witness. I complained about his conduct to me in an important race, Cam's finding 50 quid, and I said no, and then I appealed against that decision, and it went to court, the Cam's tribunal, by the way, not the court, but it's a court, and I'll never forget it. And we were still talking at 2 o'clock in the morning of the hearing, and Alan said something like, in fact, the guy that acted for me and I met 2 or 3 years ago, we're still reliving it a little bit, where Alan said, he put it to Alan that you're running a bob on purpose. And I said, no, I wouldn't have done that. And they said, what do you mean you wouldn't have done that? And Alan said, well, every other time I run the Bob Jane on purpose, I come off second best, which in a legal case wasn't very good evidence for Alan. And they shuffled their papers as he said that. Thank goodness, it was 2 o'clock a.m. And about half an hour later, they unfortunately for Alan, he lost all his points from that race and made me first. So Alan had a problem in the championship because with other events, but of course he was still behind me in the last race at Oran Park in terms of points. So, but in a way, whilst it was those circumstances created an environment and a promotion for Oran Park which is beyond belief, because Oran Park had the biggest crowd in history, both in '71 and again in '72.
And here's the checkered flag coming out for Bob Jane. And there's the winner. And let's take the margin. Here's 4 seconds now. It's come up to 5 seconds to Gagan. 8 seconds to Beachy, and a further fraction of a second to Foley. So the order as we saw them pass the line would be first, car number 7, Bob Jane, the Chev Camaro. Second,
The Mustang reign had come to an end, but Australia's touring car scene had been changed forever. The muscle car was here to stay, and the fans loved them and still do.
By '69, you had Moffat in the Trans Am, which really was state of the art. That was the best you could possibly get in a touring car at that time. I think he described it as a Formula One car with doors. It was that good. But then you had Norm Beachy, who'd moved into the Monaro program. He started developing the local Monaro. Started with the HK GTS 327. Then you had Pete Gagan in the Mustang, which was in its third year of competition. So the bar was being raised all the time, and this is what led eventually to Bob Jane saying, well, I'm going to go one step further than you all, and he brought in the 7-litre ZL1 Camaro. So you could see the muscle car war was stepping up every year.
In that mid-60s period, when those cars became the dominant factor in racing in this country, it was because they were exciting. And they changed the public perception away from racing cars per se and onto touring cars.
Those cars are legends today. All of them. They're all legends. I mean, look at Gagan's car. I understand it was sold. We weren't smart enough to keep our cars, all of us, but Gagan's car was sold recently, I think, for $330,000. This has got to tell you something. And that's probably cheap, probably worth $1 million. I mean, that's what history is. Muscle cars are. They are now reviving the whole world. And the same all over the world.